Hey everybody, this is Mike again, your friendly neighborhood archtop guy, going to show you the complete cycle of removing and then reinstalling the Charlie Christian pickup and giving you a bit more detail of what is actually inside of these guitars with these beautiful Charlie or bar pickups. And I'm going to try to do that as concisely as possible, but this may be a long video. Feel free to skip forward. But what we're going to do is take this one out, put it back in, and show you how to orient the bobbin correctly and talk a little bit about the differences in these pickups that you'll see in many guitars from the 1930s, these ES-150s, ES-250s, and then you'll see this pickup reintroduced in the 70s, early 80s with a 175cc from Gibson. But for the most part, this was a popular first generation pickup that led to the development of others like the P90, the Alnico staple pickups, then the humbuckers, etc. So this is the grandfather of all pickups almost. So inside of this guitar, this is a little refinished one that I've got to practice on here. The top's been refinished by myself. It had been refinished by someone else with this really weird reddish brown color, so I thought there'd be less harm if I just strip that all off and make it natural. I kind of like it. And what we'll do is then remove the strings, which I've done. Then we're going to need a couple of tools, so prepare in advance, please. If you're going to do this, needle nose pliers. In this case, you can obviously see the screws are flat and not Phillips, so straight edge screwdriver. And then that's basically all we're going to need to take it out. So let me just show you quickly. Some people try to take this out by just simply dropping the screws out and then pulling the pickup out. That's not going to happen that smoothly for a couple of reasons, and I'll show you here just so you can see what I mean. So inside of the guitar obviously is your whole harness with the pots and a little bit of slack between the bracket wire, which is attached to the magnets going down to the pots. There's not a great deal of slack, for one thing. So you can't just simply pull this out in many cases unless you first loosen the pots and get the pots to drop down in the guitar. Undo, of course, the jack as well, so you can be ready to lift the entire bracket out. But before you lift the bracket and all the pots out, what you need to do is wiggle and massage the bobbin off of the blade while it's still in the guitar, and I'll show you how to do that. And be careful when you do that, because the lead and ground, which are connecting the bobbin to the bracket, aren't always long enough to give you a lot of wiggle room. So you don't want to yank this thing off and then pull with great strength. Otherwise you're going to damage the lead wire and the ground. So gently, when I say gently, I'll show you, massage this thing off and then lay it to the side. Once you've done that, then we take out the screws, grab the blade with the needle nose pliers and slowly extricate or extract the bracket, which is already now separate from the bobbin and only attached by the wires, so you got to hold them together and pull it out. Okay, so that's what's going on inside. Taking a closer look at the guitar, I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit better. You don't need to see me. And I'm not going to do this on speed dial, but what you want to be very careful of is not trying to get in there with a screwdriver and pry this thing up, for obvious reasons. If I stick that in there and just start yanking on it, you're going to have cracks into the spruce, and you can see someone probably in the past tried to do that and gave us a little crack here. I have another Charlie Christian, an ES-150 with a big split here, and you can almost imagine someone going like this and trying to pry up the bobbin. So don't do that. What you do first want to do is get some tape, put it on one edge. I like to protect the edges around the bobbin cutout because it's so old. It's easy to splinter wood off, and you don't want that to happen like we did up here. So first I'll protect the outside edges of the cutout with a little bit of tape. And I'm sure this is really entertaining watching me do this. But, you know, I have a habit of being fairly meticulous with this stuff. And if I just blow over the details and do highlights in a final video, then you might miss something that I'm taking for granted you knew. So I don't want to do that. All right, here we go. We're gonna take out the bobbin off the blade. We're not even gonna touch the screws yet. Definitely be careful and go slowly. Many times this blade is so old, or the guitar is so old, and no one's ever taken the blade apart. I'm sorry, the bobbin off of the blade. It's gonna be corroded, and there'll be some the green fairy dust that we all despise so much. But carefully remove anything you can see, you know, scrape a little bit of the dust away if you can. If it looks like it's fairly clean, you'll have no problem. If it looks like it's got some buildup and mineral deposits, etc., holding it down, you're gonna have to get a little razor blade and slice it the best you can to separate it. And then you can see this one looks pretty clean. Obviously I picked the clean one for this demo. So what we'll do now is first see, you know, how much, without pressing too hard, just get in there and feel around a little bit and see how much resistance you're gonna get if you're to, yep, it's a little bit tight. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna raise, with these screws, I'm gonna raise the bobbin up, out, past the flush point. So as you see, as I'm turning the screws here, be careful you don't scratch the top. You always want to guard the tip of the screwdriver with your bottom finger. So I've just raised pretty substantially the blade away from the surface of the guitar, right? That'll help me get a better grip on it to take off the bobbin. Do the same on this side, raising the blade up. Might want to loosen or tighten this third one just to even expose that bobbin more. So at this point, you can see we've got some pretty good grabbing room. So I'm going to go ahead and try with my fingers to very gently lift and massage this bobbin off. And go slowly. There's no rush. You don't want to pop this thing off and break the bobbin or do anything you'll regret to the top of the guitar. So this one's good. It's a little bit stubborn, you can see. What I'm going to do is spray some WD-40, tiny bit just down inside here, and loosen that up. And then we'll come back and, oh no, actually it's coming off. Hold on. Okay, so we're going to just kind of wiggle back and forth. And I hope you can see the blade is then, you know, staying where it is, but the bobbin's coming off the blade. This is an original Charlie Christian pickup, so I want to be fairly gentle with it and not create problems because they're hard to find. You can spend $2,000, $3,000 finding one of these and rescuing it from some broken down ES-150 or otherwise modified guitar. So I'm getting a little jammed up here. The bottom of the bobbin is getting hung up on this bottom edge of the cutout. So I've got to just put that back down a little bit. So you can see I'm wiggling. Good, now it's loose. And you can see the lead wires. If it's an original Charlie Christian, you're gonna see cloth wire if it hasn't been rewound. So what we've got here is some green cloth wire. The positive lead is close to the center and the ground is on the outside. And a little bit of leeway. See, I'm not tugging on the thing. I certainly don't want to ruin those connections. So I'm just going to pull it over here to the edge and it's a little bit twisted. Be careful and get as much slack as you can. So this is perfect. I'm just going to set it to the side, and what I'll always do, we're on an angle today so I can show you better, but even if I weren't, I always taped this bobbin to the top because you don't want to have any unnecessary strain put on those connections. And obviously if the bobbin falls off the edge of the guitar, you're going to have a problem and tear up some of the wiring. So there we go. That's secure. Now what we're going to do is remove the screws. I do the back one first, and it's fairly straightforward. It finally gets loose enough you can just take it off with your fingers. Okay, so pop that off. The third screw there is the longest one. That washer usually comes off, but it's nicely attached to the finish that I didn't let dry long enough before I put it there, so we'll just leave that there. Okay, take the second one off. I don't really have to hold anything yet. I'm just going freehand. Put my screws in a safe place. Now obviously if I take this third one off, then all the magnets and bracket, they're gonna fall and hit the bottom of the guitar, tear out this lead wire. So this is where you pull out your handy dandy pincers or needle nose pliers. And I'm gonna get a hold of that blade. Don't worry about scratching the blade, it's not that big a deal. Now what I normally I do, I just get it kind of loose. It's only an inch long screw. So I'll get it loose a little bit. This one actually I'm just gonna use my hands to hold. The pliers come in handy when we reinstall it, but taking it out, I'm just gonna use my fingers and hold onto the blade. Okay, so third screw out, set it to the side. Now, if you had the bobbin on this still, there's no way in hell you're gonna be able to pull this thing out through this very, very narrow gap cutout, which is why some people end up tearing the guitar up, because they just aren't aware this bobbin comes off of the whole bracket to begin with. So now that we know that, we're gonna tilt this bracket down, and then guess what? We realize we haven't loosened the pots yet. Okay, so what I would do, obviously before this, I would have screwed the pots and let them drop down into the bottom, and then I would have been able to simply and very quickly remove this whole thing, and it would pop out just like, just imagine, so I don't have to unscrew all the pots. I would have just popped this right out. I'm going to set that inside. This would have been inside without the screws, obviously. Would have just lifted basically straight up like this, pulled that baby out of there, and the pots and everything else would have followed. And you would set that to the side and adjust it or work on it as necessary. But we won't do that today because I don't want to undo these pots without a real need. So now getting it back in, obviously, is this simple work of doing exactly the opposite of what you just did. And so I'll grab this, pull it up through. And the tricky part is when you see these wires. In fact, let me pause here for a second because I do want to show the springs. So I'll be right back.